What happens when a humble woman in faded jeans walks into a showroom of million-dollar cars, only to be laughed at, humiliated, and told she doesn't belong? What the staff didn't know was, she wasn't just anybody. And what came next? No one saw it coming. This story will leave you speechless. Collision. Before we dive in, tell us, where are you watching from? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to follow more powerful stories like this one. Part 1. The first glance. The sun glinted sharply off the polished marble floor of Preston Motors, a luxury car dealership nestled in the heart of Manhattan. The morning was still young when a woman stepped inside, her sneakers whispering against the floor as she crossed the threshold. Dressed in faded jeans, a plain white t-shirt, and her dark curly hair tied back neatly, she carried herself with calm confidence. Her name was Danielle Rivers. Danielle had just turned 46. A middle-aged black woman with a graceful demeanor, warm brown eyes, and an air of quiet strength. But the moment she entered the showroom, the mood subtly shifted. Sales associates in sleek suits cast quick glances her way. Their expressions, once neutral, morphed into skepticism. At the center of this reaction stood Connor Whitaker, the dealership's lead sales associate. A tall, immaculately dressed man with sharp blue eyes and slicked back hair, Connor prided himself on reading people within 5 seconds. To him, Danielle didn't belong here. His smirk widened slightly as he stepped forward. "Good morning," Connor greeted her with a professional tone lined with sarcasm. "Can I help you with something?" Danielle offered a polite smile. "Yes, I'm interested in the Bentley Continental GT Mulliner." His brow lifted ever so slightly, a chuckle dancing behind his breath. "Ah, the Mulliner," he said, deliberately glancing down at her sneakers. "It's our most exclusive model, starts around $350,000. Generally, we only show it to clients who've made appointments in advance." From behind desks and polished counters, other employees watched, some hiding smiles behind their hands. A few customers paused to observe as if awaiting a spectacle. Danielle could feel the air thickening with judgment. Still, she stood firm. "I understand," she said softly. "But I'd like to see the car anyway, if it's available." Connor tilted his head and let the silence stretch. "Apologies, ma'am, but this model is reserved for verified buyers. You might have better luck at a pre-owned dealership a few blocks down." His words, masked as courteous, landed like sharp blades. Danielle blinked slowly. Her voice remained composed. "This car is meant as a gift. My sister just completed her final round of chemotherapy. I'd like to do something special for her." Connor's eyes flicked to her sneakers again, then back to her eyes. "I'm sorry to hear that," he said with mechanical sympathy. "But again, our policy is very clear. We aim to serve customers with demonstrated interest and means." Nearby, whispers rose and fell. Danielle felt her cheeks flush, but she did not back down. "Thank you for your time," she said, offering one final glance at the Bentley. Her heart pounded as she turned to leave, head held high. As she walked toward the exit, her dignity intact but her spirit bruised, Connor turned his attention elsewhere. Moments later, a well-dressed couple walked in, and he greeted them with the warmth of someone eager to impress. "Mr. and Mrs. Sutherland. So good to see you again," he beamed, conveniently forgetting the woman he had just dismissed. Danielle exited into the cool air of the Manhattan morning. The city buzzed on around her, unaware of what had just occurred inside Preston Motors. But she knew this wasn't the end. Her story wouldn't be defined by Connor's prejudice, nor by the suits and whispers of those who thought she didn't belong. It was only the beginning. Part 2. A name that echoes the next morning, just as the golden sunlight spilled over the Manhattan skyline, the hum of a powerful engine broke the quiet outside Preston Motors. A sleek, obsidian-black Rolls-Royce Phantom glided to a stop in front of the dealership, its polished body catching reflections from every angle. Inside the showroom, Connor Whitaker looked up from his cappuccino and squinted through the glass. The corners of his mouth curled with anticipation. "Gentlemen," he said smugly to his colleagues, brushing imaginary lint off his lapel, "I believe a VIP has just arrived." The sales team buzzed with interest. This was no ordinary car, and they knew it. Only true elites drove Rolls-Royces like this, custom-ordered, imported, and costing well over $1 million. As the rear door opened, the atmosphere in the showroom shifted into an expectant hush. Out stepped a man in a tailored navy suit, silver-gray temples at his closely cropped hairline, and an unmistakable presence that turned heads. He adjusted his cuffs and looked around calmly before opening the door on the other side. Danielle Rivers stepped out. Wearing the same jeans, the same wit part 2, a name that echoes the next morning, just as the golden sunlight spilled over the Manhattan skyline, the hum of a powerful engine broke the quiet outside Preston Motors. A sleek, obsidian-black Rolls-Royce Phantom glided to a stop in front of the dealership, its polished body catching reflections from every angle. Inside the showroom, Connor Whitaker looked up from his cappuccino and squinted through the glass. The corners of his mouth curled with anticipation. "Gentlemen," he said smugly to his colleagues, brushing imaginary lint off his lapel, "I believe a VIP has just arrived." The sales team buzzed with interest. This was no ordinary car, and they knew it. Only true elites drove Rolls-Royces like this, custom-ordered, imported, and costing well over $1 million. As the rear door opened, the atmosphere in the showroom shifted into an expectant hush. Out stepped a man in a tailored navy suit, silver-gray temples at his closely cropped hairline, and an unmistakable presence that turned heads. He adjusted his cuffs and looked around calmly before opening the door on the other side. Danielle Rivers stepped out. Wearing the same jeans, the same white t-shirt, the same clean sneakers. Her posture was the same, too, dignified, poised, but her aura had transformed. She was not alone this time, and everyone sensed it. Connor's jaw visibly tightened. The suited man stepped forward, speaking with a calm authority that filled the room. "Good morning. My name is Theodore Rivers. I believe you know my wife, Danielle." Gasps rippled among the staff. Theodore Rivers. The billionaire philanthropist and founder of Rivers Clean Tech. A man who had graced the cover of Forbes, spoken at global summits, and quietly supported dozens of causes from education to civil rights. Connor paled. Richard Crane, the dealership's general manager, quickly emerged from his office, adjusting his tie and forcing a wide smile. "Mr. Rivers. What an honor to have you here." Theodore's eyes didn't stray from Connor. "We're here because my wife was denied the respect every customer deserves. I'm here to make sure your team understands the cost of that mistake." Richard tried to interject, but Theodore raised a hand. "We're not looking for compensation or apologies. What we want is accountability." Danielle, standing beside him, remained quiet, her expression serene. It was Theodore who turned toward Connor and continued. "I'd like you, personally, to handle the paperwork for our purchase today. We're buying that Bentley Continental GT Mulliner, today, right now. Not because of how you treated my wife, but despite it." Connor swallowed hard, his voice dry. "Of course. Right this way." The transaction was conducted in full view of everyone. There were no side rooms or hushed tones. Theodore insisted it all happen at the central desk. As the papers were signed, he spoke just loudly enough to be heard by the watching staff and customers. "You see," he said, "the value of a person isn't measured in their clothes or how much they flaunt. It's measured in how they carry themselves in the face of judgment." Danielle, still silent, offered Connor a final glance, not cold or angry, but steady and clear. "Everyone deserves kindness," she said simply. "Even those who forget how to give it." The sale completed, Theodore and Danielle exited the dealership with the keys in hand. A crowd had gathered outside. Reporters, curious onlookers, even a few influencers who had somehow caught wind of the scene. Cameras flashed. As the Rolls-Royce pulled away, Connor remained rooted behind the glass, his reflection looking back at him. He'd never forget the name Danielle Rivers again. And neither would anyone else in that showroom. Part 3, The Power of a Second Chance. That evening, the news had already gone viral. Blogs, social media, and even local news networks were abuzz with the video clip taken from a smartphone. Woman discriminated at luxury dealership returns with billionaire husband, the captions read. Danielle hadn't said much to the press, nor had Theodore. But the footage said enough. Meanwhile, in the quiet of their Upper Manhattan penthouse, Theodore and Danielle sat together sipping tea. The lights of the city blinked around them, but their focus was on something greater. That was never about a car, Danielle said softly. Theodore nodded. It never is. She looked at him, a small smile tugging at her lips. Do you think it made a difference? Theodore turned toward her. Maybe not to everyone. But to someone, yes. And that's enough. Down at Preston Motors, Connor was in his office, staring blankly at the wall. His manager, Richard, had called an emergency staff meeting for the next day. HR had been looped in. Public relations sent a memo. The dealership's brand had taken a hit. Connor knew he had made a mistake. But it wasn't just about business anymore. It was personal. He sat down at his desk, opened a new email, and began to write. To Danielle Rivers. Subject, My apology. Dear Mrs. Rivers, I write to you with humility and sincere regret. Yesterday, I judged you without reason, and I wronged you deeply. There is no excuse for the assumptions I made or the words I chose. You showed grace in the face of prejudice, and I hope to learn from that. I am truly sorry. And if you'd allow me the opportunity, I would like to meet again, this time to listen and to learn. Sincerely, Connor Whitaker. He hit send. Then he sat back and let the silence settle. Tomorrow might be the beginning of a different journey. Part 4, A Lesson Beyond the Showroom. The following Saturday afternoon, Preston Motors was quieter than usual. The buzz of luxury car enthusiasts was replaced by a more subdued atmosphere. In the showroom's reception area, Connor Whitaker stood wearing an unfamiliar expression, nervous anticipation. Gone was the sharp suit and confident swagger. Instead, he wore a simple gray polo with a small, Collins Foundation logo stitched near the chest. Connor glanced at the time. It was nearly noon. He had arrived early at the invitation of Danielle Rivers. Not for a sale. Not for redemption through money. But for something more transformative, a charity event hosted by the Collins Foundation, dedicated to supporting underserved youth of color through education and mentorship. The event was held at a community center on the Upper East Side. When Connor arrived, the place was alive with laughter, music, and the chatter of families and volunteers. Children darted between activity booths, while adults engaged in thoughtful discussions about opportunity, justice, and self-worth. Connor had never been to an event like this. He felt awkward, out of place. But he was determined to stay. Danielle greeted him near the welcome table. She wore a flowing emerald blouse and slacks, her demeanor calm as ever. Mr. Whitaker, she said with a soft smile. Thank you for coming. He nodded, his voice low. Thank you for inviting me. I know I have a lot to learn. Danielle motioned toward a small group of teenagers working on a robotics demonstration. Then let's start there. For the next hour, Connor found himself swept into a world entirely different from the luxury showroom he knew so well. He watched as a shy girl named Tasha explained how her team had built a small AI-powered rover. A young boy named Jalen showed him how to code basic instructions into a microcontroller. Connor listened more than he spoke. And for once, he didn't feel the need to assert himself. At lunch, he helped serve plates. He chatted with parents about their aspirations for their kids. One mother told him, "We don't want pity. We want equal access. Equal respect. Her words echoed in his mind. Later that day, Alexander Rivers arrived and mingled with the attendees. When he saw Connor across the hall, he gave a curt nod, not warm, but not cold either. It was a gesture of observation, perhaps cautious approval. As the sun dipped lower, Danielle stood at the front of the room to give closing remarks. Connor found himself seated among the crowd, listening intently. Today, Danielle began, we came together not just to celebrate talent and effort, but to confront the silent biases that often shape our daily lives. Respect doesn't come from money, nor does it come from fame. It comes from humanity. She glanced toward Connor, not with judgment, but with an invitation to grow. Some of us made mistakes, she continued. But mistakes are also moments. Moments we can choose to turn into understanding. What we choose to do after that moment, that's where change happens. The crowd erupted in applause. Connor stood quietly, clapping not just for the speech, but for everything it symbolized. As the event came to an end, Danielle walked over and extended a hand. Connor shook it. I'd like to volunteer again, he said. Danielle smiled. Then we'll see you next month. As he left the center and stepped into the fading light of the city, Connor knew something had shifted. This wasn't the end of a PR nightmare, it was the beginning of his redefinition. And it was only the beginning. Part 5, The Redemption Drive. A month after the charity event, the transformation within Connor Whitaker was no longer an internal shift, it was beginning to manifest outwardly. At Preston Motors, whispers had started to circulate among the sales team. Connor was different. He no longer walked the floor with arrogance. He listened more in meetings. He asked questions, not to challenge, but to understand. And most telling of all, he began mentoring the newest hire, a young biracial salesman named Andre, whose mother had once been denied financing at this very dealership. One Thursday afternoon, Alexander Rivers made a surprise visit to the dealership. This time, there was no fanfare, no luxury convoy. He arrived in a modest black sedan and walked into the glass-paneled building with quiet resolve. Connor was near the back of the showroom, reviewing specs on a new release when he looked up and met Alexander's gaze. Their last encounter at the charity event had been civil but distant. Now, it was time to face something more consequential. Mr. Rivers, Connor greeted him, standing straight. Alexander nodded. You've been busy, I hear. I've been learning, Connor replied sincerely. I came today not just to browse, Alexander said, his voice measured. But because Danielle and I spoke. She said you've kept your word. That you've shown humility. Connor didn't know what to say, so he simply bowed his head. Alexander looked around the showroom. This dealership carries the weight of what happened that day. But what matters now is what you do next. Connor offered a breath. I want to make it right. Not just with words, but with action. Alexander stepped closer. Good. Because I have a proposal. Danielle and I are launching a new pilot program, the Equity in Excellence Initiative. We're working with businesses across the city to train staff on bias, respect, and inclusive leadership. And we want Preston Motors to be our first official partner. Connor's eyes widened. You trust us with that? Alexander's reply was swift. Trust isn't given. It's earned. But I see you're trying. This is your chance to do something lasting. Without hesitation, Connor said, yes. I'll present it to the owners. I'll back it fully. Alexander extended a hand. We'll be watching. They shook hands, firmly, solemnly. In the weeks that followed, Connor spearheaded internal training. He brought in community leaders to speak. He hosted listening sessions with clients who had experienced subtle discrimination. The showroom changed, not in its luxury branding, but in its tone. Danielle visited often. She saw the changes. Andre, now thriving, was entrusted with leading the dealership's outreach division. And the customers noticed. People of all backgrounds felt more welcome. But one day stood out. A young black woman entered Preston Motors, wearing a simple suit and holding a binder. As she approached the reception, Connor himself stepped forward. "Welcome to Preston Motors," he said warmly. "How can we help you?" She smiled, opened her binder, and said, "I'm here to deliver the final proposal for your Equity in Excellence certification. The Collins Foundation Board has reviewed your progress. It's time for our final interview." Connor's heart swelled. Not for the title, but for the validation of everything this journey had become. And when Danielle herself walked in moments later, offering a proud smile, he knew the road to redemption, while long, was no longer a dream. It was real, and it had only just begun. Part 6, The Mirror of Accountability. A year after the incident that sparked change, Preston Motors was almost unrecognizable, not in appearance, but in culture. A framed certificate from the Collins Foundation now hung in the main entrance, Equity in Excellence, first certified dealership of 2024. Inside the break room, Connor sat in a reflective moment between meetings. Across from him sat Andre, now one of the top-performing sales consultants in the state. "You remember what it felt like the first time we met?" Andre asked, half laughing, half challenging. Connor gave a quiet chuckle. "You mean the guy who didn't say a word to you for 3 weeks?" "Exactly." Connor nodded. "I do. And I think about it a lot. Not to dwell, but to remind myself." Andre leaned forward. "It's working. Customers talk. People feel seen now. And I've learned a lot from you." The praise made Connor uneasy. He didn't seek credit anymore. What mattered was the system they were changing together. A notification pinged on Connor's tablet. An email from Danielle. Subject, Speaking Opportunity. He opened it. It was an invitation to speak on a national panel about transforming bias in professional environments. Connor hesitated. The idea of being a public voice, when his past still bore shame, made him pause. But after a moment, he replied, "Yes. I'll do it. If my story can help someone else reflect, then it's worth it." Later that month, standing in front of a packed auditorium of executives, educators, and activists, Connor Whitaker recounted his journey, not to seek applause, but to lay bare the truth. "I used to believe respect was earned by appearance, by status. I was wrong. Respect is the baseline. It's something every human being deserves by default." There was silence, then resounding applause. And in the front row, Danielle Rivers smiled. Connor had once looked at people and made assumptions. Now, he looked and asked questions. He listened. And in doing so, he learned the greatest truth of all. That redemption is not a destination. It is a daily decision. And in that decision, we rediscover our humanity. In a world where appearances too often dictate value, this story reminds us of a timeless truth: dignity has no price tag, and humanity cannot be measured in fabric, status, or skin color. The journey of Danielle and Alexander Rivers, and even that of Connor Whitaker, reveals how deeply rooted biases can exist beneath polished surfaces, and how transformative it is when we dare to confront them. This is not just a tale about racism or classism in a luxury showroom, it is about the choices we make when faced with the pain of being misjudged or the discomfort of realizing we've judged others too quickly. It is a reminder that grace in adversity, humility in reflection, and sincerity in change are among the rarest, yet most powerful, virtues a person can hold. For every elder who has been overlooked, for every adult who has learned too late, and for every heart still healing from injustice, this story gently insists, it is never too late to change. Not to erase the past, but to grow from it. Let us raise children, businesses, and communities not on prestige, but on principle. Let us meet each other first with eyes of respect before any label, any title, or assumption. Because, ultimately, the true luxury in life is not the car we drive, but the compassion we show. If this story moved you, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs this message, and subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to ring the bell so you won't miss our next heart-touching story. And we'd love to hear from you. Tell us in the comments, where are you watching from, and what did this story mean to you?